What's the most intelligent thing you've witnessed an animal do? I was setting up my Christmas tree and was putting up the ball ornaments. They were in a box by the tree. My dog came by and tried to take some of the balls. I said that she couldn't. They were for the tree, and did the no sign with my hands and pointed at the balls and then at the tree as I said it. She went on her way and a few minutes later she came back with her little play ball. She puts her little play ball in the box along with the other ornaments and pushes the box towards me. Then she laid with her belly up expecting belly rubs. I spend a lot of time in the local mountains and had summited one of the higher peaks enough times to establish a bit of a relationship with the ravens that lived on it. One summer, I was up there on a day that turned out to be much hotter than forecasted and one of the ravens approached me like usual, but this time came right next to me as I drank from my bottle and threw his head back, beak open, mimicking the chugging motion. I asked if he wanted some. He croaked in agreement, so I poured some in my hand and held it out. That was still a little too close for comfort for him, so he walked away and proceeded to walk around and inspect the surface of all of the rock until he found a large enough indent to hold some water. He croaked at me and pecked at the spot for me to pour some in, drank it up, and then walked back and bobbed his head happily before flying away. I've always known how intelligent they are, but it still strikes me how human their interactions can be. I had a cat that somehow knew when I switched off my cochlear implants. Whenever my doorbell rings, she'd come up to me where I can see her meow at me. Then she walks up to the door looking back to see if I'm following her. I never taught her that. R.I.P. Nix. I'll use the same story I used for another unrelated question on here. While unintelligent in actions, it takes some kind of intelligence for an animal to know how to play games. I witnessed two crows perched up on the light post outside my house playing what I can only describe as a game of chicken. They both would jump off the light post simultaneously and free fall towards the ground, and fly off at the very last second. My guess is whoever got closer to the ground won that round, but who knows. Well, on one of their attempts, one of the crows waited too long and smacked right into the ground lol. It got up and flew back to the top of the pole, but to this day it's the funniest dang thing I've ever witnessed, and it was one of those things I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't seen it with my own two eyes. My Jack Russell would come into the living room, see a large mutt dog in the prime laying area, calmly walk over to the door and ask to go out. Large dog would leap up and run excitedly to the door. Jack Russell would wait for a human to head to the door and ask out again, all the while the large goofball was getting more excited. Someone would open the door. Large dog would barrel out and bound around the yard before looking back at the door where the Jack Russell would stand long enough to make eye contact with him before smugly walking over to the prime laying area and kicking her feet out behind her to relax. If the mutt came back in, he would go stand by her and just look heartbroken before going somewhere else to lay. I miss that smug little girl. Goofball gets all the prime spots now. Goofball gets all the prime spots now. Why did that make me feel? I had a pet sun conure a little while back. Wasn't sure if it was a boy or girl, as I never got it sexed, but I named it Charlie and generally referred to him as him. For some reason, Charlie hated women. Perfectly fine with all dudes, but would basically do the bird version of a growl anytime a girl came too close. My girlfriend of the time was desperate for Charlie to like her, and for the first year of our relationship who generally acted towards her the same way that he acted towards all women. Then one fateful day, we were sitting next to each other on the couch with Charlie on my shoulder. Charlie crawled his way down to my knee and did a little head bob and chirp that I generally associated with him being in a good mood. He then hopped onto the GF's knee and continued his displays of contentment, head bopping, chirping, grooming, etc. Over the course of the next hour, he would move up the GF's legs and torso and find a new perch and continue to be his jolly little self. The GF was paralyzed with excitement that Charlie was finally coming to accept her. Eventually he made his way to her shoulder and, again, sat there being happy. The GF is staring at me overjoyed. Then, out of nowhere, Charlie turns and bites her face as hard as he freaking can, and immediately launches himself across the room to perch on our cabinet high up. The sucker meticulously planned tricking the GF just to get close enough to bite her face. I'd like to think that was his thought process anyway. That would not surprise me. Parrots are smart and they use their powers for evil, or at least for trolling. I had this mutt beagle mix, One time I was making a sandwich, and he was begging for food. I promptly told him to go away. With a defeated look in his eye, he starts to walk away. All of a sudden his ears pop up and he starts barking at the door and sits in front of it. He always did this if someone was at the door. I put my sandwich on the counter and go to the door to unlock it. Once I get to the door, the little sucker bolts across the room, jumps on the counter, grabs the sandwich and runs and hides. I was even that mad I was impressed. When I was a child, my friend and I were rounding up sheep with our fathers and the dogs. It was a hilly area and we were pushing them down a gully into the yards. One of the dogs took off over a hill and about 15 minutes later it met us back near the yards with 15 extra sheep that were missed. My Siamese cat once opened a cupboard in the kitchen and dragged a sealed bag of cat food into the lounge for me to open because I'd forgotten to feed her. At least she didn't rip it open right there in the kitchen. Your cat has nice manners. My basset hound and cat have become codependent when hunting. They'll approach a pile of firewood with a rat's nest in it and the dog will bark and move around the wood to scare out the rats, while the cat hides ready to pounce. Once the rats try to escape, the cat catches them and they each take a rat for dinner. My neighbor, rural, had a hunting cat. He'd go out with a .22 to thin the local squirrel population as they would eat into our houses and didn't have enough natural predators. She'd follow him when he grabbed the gun, retrieve kills, and wait until he told her she was a good girl before she'd eat it. A chimp at a zoo was clapping like the star of the show, and when we would start clapping he would dance for us. He was hyping us up. The greatest showman. We've taught our cat to get bugs for us. She can be anywhere in the house and if someone yells bugs she comes running and takes care of it. Maybe not the most intelligent thing in the world, but it's pretty helpful. We have a cat where if there's a mosquito or something near the ceiling, you can lift him up and he'll eat the bug once he's close enough. Sometimes we'll just walk around the room using the cat like a bug vacuum. My dog learning to open the baby gate and then close it behind her. We had a beagle that did this because the other two dogs couldn't figure out how to open the gates and he wanted to be left alone. Once when feeding bread to ducks, I know, this was a while back and we know better now, a heron came up, took some bread, threw it in the water, and grabbed the fish that came up to eat the bread. My old cat Blackjack liked going outside late at night, but we didn't have a cat flap at the time. He would scratch at the door, but sometimes we couldn't hear him, so he kicked it up a notch. While stood on his hind legs, he would scratch with both paws on the door, whilst also hitting the letter slot in the door. It was spring-loaded and not exactly quiet. After a few weeks of scratch 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 bang on repeat at 3 AM, my dad installed a cat flap. I was crossing a huge frozen river in the winter. The ice was about 1.5 foot in thickness, but some areas had low density. It was my dog, myself, my friend, and my friend's dog. My friend crossed first and had one of her legs break through the less dense ice, but she made it. I then watched her dog cross very nervously and carefully in roughly the same path and not crack the ice. Then came my turn. I actually sent my dog to go first. He sniffs the ground and goes to cross, but he takes this weird scribbly path instead of going just straight. I ended up following him and noticed that the ice was the most dense out there. I cross without a problem. Scribbly path, upvoted for descriptive beauty. It's a lovely sounding phrase too. Yesterday I saw crows passing around a small plastic ball which they took away from a pigeon. World Cup fever is everywhere. My dog places one of her squeaky toys near a small hole between our fence and the neighbors. She then squeaks it and waits for the dog next door to approach in anticipation of retrieving the toy just so she can bark at him and be in butthole. Hey other dog, see me or other dog, frick you. We helped rehabilitate a crow when I was a child. It had fallen out of its nest. The nest was much too high for us to return it, and my parents rescued it just in time since there were some neighborhood cats getting ready to pounce on and eat it. So we took care of it till it could fly and take care of itself. It was an incredibly smart bird, very social, and it enjoyed pranks. Its favorite prank was to wait till someone was sitting on one of the lounge chairs, then it would walk under, reach up through the slats and pinch their butt with his beak. It would do this to many people, but it had one particular person, a friend of my parents, that it seemed to enjoy targeting. She had the best reaction where she would come leaping out of the chair to see what had gotten her, every time. The crow enjoyed that so much that it didn't care if other people were sitting around. It would always look for her. It was not because she had been mean to the crow. She was a nice lady. The crow just legitimately enjoyed messing with people and her in particular. I also had a dog that taught herself how to open the refrigerator, open the pantry, and break out of the car. My parents had to baby-proof the house food supplies against a dog. I was at my nan's house once, and she is a big admirer of wildlife. Big or small, feathered or not, she liked them all. One day she mentioned she had a regular crow visitor that she fed. He would caw if there wasn't any food in the garden and my nan would oblige him, she says. Sure, I thought until I saw what she was chucking to him. I presumed nuts or seed, but no, slices of bread. Now the crow couldn't carry it away, and he didn't want to eat it out in the open, and in my nan's and my presence. This crow stands on one side of the slice, folds it over and tries to fly away with it, but no, still too big. So it does the same again, so that it can actually grasp a hold of it this time and proceeds to fly away with it all folded up. Me stood there slack-jawed at what I just saw. The birds are smarter than they appear, people. My secret life's ambition is to befriend a wild crow. Whenever I let my dog dictate the walk, the go sniff command, where I'll let her lead and give the full extent of the leash, she will walk me to the local pet store 100% of the time. I have a Senegal parrot, and if I put a plastic bottle cap in his cage, he'll put it in his beak, scoop it full of water out of his water dish and then sit on his perch and hold it in one claw and sip out of it like it's a cup of coffee. I have no idea where he learned this. He says, sipping a cup of tea, in direct sight of Parrot. I have a Maine Coon and we lived in a ghetto apartment in Georgia. In the summertime it gets hot. So my cat started jumping on top of the fridge and using his back foot to kick open the top of the freezer door, jump down inside the freezer, and take cool naps. Clever little crap. Dwight's job just got a lot easier. My mom was in her bedroom reading one night and her cell phone started ringing in the other room. Our dog, totally of her own accord, got up, went into the other room, picked up my mom's ringing phone, brought it back to the bedroom and dropped it in her lap. My cat gets really excited when my phone alarm goes off because he knows it's food and petting time. Also, I have PTSD. When I have nightmares or night terrors, my cat wakes me up and snuggles with me, licks me. It's the sweetest thing. I love the little guy. My childhood kitten hurt her paw once and was limping for a week. She got spoiled a ton and granted many privileges. Her whole life, after any time she wanted anything, she'd hold up one paw and pretend limp. You have been visited by the beach doggo. You shall be blessed with good weather all summer. If you are new to the channel, I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.